Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om 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 Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Interesting. In this book, 10 verses are missing.
Which one is that?
Because I planned actually to start with Bhagavad Gita chapter 4, text number 8 and 9, and starts with 10 from Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, the commentary. So, welcome to our second day of Narasimha Katha. Glad you found the time and the energy to participate, and hopefully I will be able to sufficiently, or at least satisfyingly, speak some of the glories of Lord Narasimha and to invoke a meditation that is favorable to get more in a celebrated mood for tomorrow when we celebrate the actual appearance day of Lord Narasimha. Vagishayasya varane lakshmiyasya chavakshasi yasya dere samvit tam narasimham maham vare pradararidayalatam bhaktavidaram sharatindurjam pande parindravandanam harim. So these are also two prayers that are dedicated to Lord Narasimha, which I personally prefer to chant up front in class, since it is about invoking the blessings of Lord Narasimha in his capacity as the giver of transcendental knowledge. And it is the first shloka is from the Srimad Bhagavatam, actually from the 10th canto, 87th chapter, text number 1. Starting with Vagishayasya Varane Lakshmiriyasya Chavakshasi, it says, Lord Narasimha is always assisted by Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and he is always embracing to his chest the goddess of fortune. The Lord is always complete in knowledge within himself. Let us offer obeisances unto Narasimha. And there's the second prayer, particularly glorifying Prahlad Maharaj. Prahlada Hridayalatam Bhaktavidaram Sharatindurjam Bhakte Parindravandanam Harim. Let me offer my obeisances unto Lord Narasimha, who is always enlightening Prahlad Maharaj within his heart, and who always kills the nations that attacks the devotees. His mercy is distributed like the moonshine, and his face is like that of a lion. Let me offer my obeisances unto him again and again. So since I don't have the actual shloka, is it here? Do we have Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur? So we can just, anyway, speak of the verse. I know why. Till you make it, yes, but thank you. Yeah. Usually, it's a very appropriate and often used shloka from Bhagavad Gita when we speak about the appearance of Lord Krishna in his different forms, that we quote his purposes, or the three purposes he's stating in the Bhagavad Gita in 4, 8, and 9, which is Paritanaya Sarana Vinashaya Chatuskritam Dharma Samstapanataya Sambhavam Yuge Yuge, where Krishna says, I appear regularly in each millennium, or in each age, in order to do three things. Paritanaya Sarana, to satisfy the sadhus, or the saintly persons, the devotees. Vinashaya Chatuskritam, to destroy the demons of Duskritina, those who are miserly or low-class personalities. And Dharma Samstapanataya, to establish that what is real Dharma, by teaching or by revealing scriptures. So these three things he does, and they are of course intertwined. Also the devotees, as also here is the case, as we heard yesterday, Prahlad Maharaj is one of these sadhus who was heavily tormented by his own father, Hiranyakashipu. So, Paritaraya Sadhana means, of course, to protect. Well, thank you. No, protect the devotees, but it's not only about protecting them from the dangers or like the threats that come from those who are atheistic, like also devotees nowadays. In Switzerland, we have no issue in that regard, but in other countries, might it be particularly countries that are dominated by Islam or like by communism or any other kind of maybe regime-like government, their devotees are even severely persecuted and killed, perhaps. You know, yeah. Also back then, like it changed, but back then also, I don't know what is the exact situation nowadays. But in Russia, there were quite some stories how devotees went through most heavy tortures and treatments, you know, in prisons, you know, in order to, how to say, relieve them from this nonsense idea that they should practice something like Krishna consciousness, about consciousness. So very heavy demoniac influence actually. So there's one aspect of it that Krishna is like prayed to protect from these dangers, you know, from these threats. And the verse I wanted to read from Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur, or better his commentary, is pointing out the actual more inner meaning or like essential meaning of Paritanaya Sadhanam is that actually he is revealing his forms and pastimes in order to please the devotees, because the actual pain or the actual suffering of the sadhus or the Vaishnavas is not necessarily what demon-like personalities, what Hiranyakashipu might do to them, though it's very severe also nowadays, as we just mentioned. In particular countries, devotees might be heavily persecuted. But the actual suffering of those pure Vaishnavas is that they feel the pangs of separation from Krishna, that they're not able to see Krishna face to face, to exchange with him, to see his form, you know, to see his pastimes. And Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur says Paritanaya Sadhana means Krishna is rather easing that pain of separation, or easing their pain of longing so strongly for seeing Krishna and for being with Krishna and seeing his forms. So he reveals his pastimes in different ways. And now we are at the point of the regular Das avatars. We say Das means 10 avatars, and one of them is Lord Narasimha. Now he appears in order to also please the devotees in various ways, by either protecting them from the demon itself, demonic influence, but also by showing his very mysterious and most glorious transcendental forms. And one form that is very strongly related to Narasimha is, can you guess, another form of the Das avatars? It's Varahadev, because we know that Varahadev came practically after Narasimha, if Hiranyakashipu got killed first, and Hiranyaksha's hatred for Vishnu was so great for one reason, because his brother Hiranyakashipu got killed by Narasimha. So Varahadev and Narasimha, they are connected in the sense that they took care of his two brothers. And there's even a combined form called Varaha and Narasimha. Also back then in Simhachalam, when I was there in Germany on the farm, one devotee, I think Nandimukhi, she had the murti she brought once to the Abhishek, and it was a Varaha and Narasimha, combined form of Varahadev and Narasimhadev. So he shows these pastimes to please the devotees, and it's also described in the Bhagavatam. He particularly appeared out of the pillar. And this was so, it is said, because he wanted to make true the statement of his devotee Prahlad Maharaj, because Hiranyakashipu was asking about the presence, where is he, the Lord, and he's asking, is he also in the pillar? And Prahlad Maharaj said yes. And then Narasimhadev chose to appear from the pillar. But not just like that, he made quite a, entrance to it by making the air or the ether sound like a heavy thunder, like most heavy, like those suddenly you can imagine. And then with this noise, he came out of the pillar. Similarly, like Parashuram was appearing in front of Lord Ram. They came and like they were on their way back from some ceremony, and Dasharat and Lord Ram, all the associates. And then suddenly the sky became black practically with heavy rain clouds and thunderstorms, earthquakes. Have you ever witnessed an earthquake? Me neither, but I just saw I saw the you see recordings, what happens there, like the so-called tsunami. That means like probably then you will never feel such fear in your life otherwise, I think. So these things are there. This is kind of these are the messengers of Parashuram, also the messenger of Narasimha Dev. If he comes in this intense forms, all the natural forces, they are like the concha practically. Like we have here the concha. So these forces are manifested. And I really like to imagine the scenery. It makes it, of course, more dramatic, but also gives us a better picture of what type of personality is that, what kind of energy is coming with him, what's his purpose, because Parashuram is manifesting anger, Lord Narasimha Dev is manifesting anger, and it's described as their transcendental ecstasy. Each form has particular ecstasies, and for Narasimha Dev it's not transcendental anger in a material sense, of course it's also transcendental anger that allows him to perform the pastimes with fighting with the demons. And since it is said even demons in this world are not really suitable matches, so even the Vaikuntha Vasis, Jaya and Vijaya, had to come to become very powerful demons to give Krishna the pleasure of this fighting. And we can see that Narasimha Dev is worshipped in many forms, starting actually, we can look at it chronologically, starting with coming from the pillar. It's called the Ukra Stamba Narasimha. Ukra is the very angry mode, and Stamba is the pillar, and that's the form that came out of the pillar. And this form we see in Srila Mayapur, for example. That's the form where Narasimha Dev is most angry. He's completely charged, and he couldn't by now release the anger by slaughtering the soldiers of Hiranyakashipu himself. So he was still extremely charged, and therefore this form is extremely fearsome and fierce. And back then the story is like Jananivas Prabhu, when he was here, he told a bit the history, how this murti was manufactured in South India. Actually, even from the leader of those people who manufactured deities was actually even an impersonalist, but he agreed to manufacture this deity for ISKCON. Because first they didn't want to. They said you cannot manufacture such a form. Why would you do that? It's like asking someone to build an atom bomb, in a sense. They feel like it's too dangerous. So it was even said when the form of Ukra Narasimha was completed, and then what happened is the building where the deity was stored, it burned down. And so they felt like, okay, now it's time, please take the deity to Mayapur. Don't leave him here, you just destroy everything. And you also hear sometimes stories that those who worship them, worship Ukra Narasimha, they experience heavy purification by destruction also. And there's even this, there was this topic actually originally only the brahmacharis worshipping Ukra Narasimha, because many householders, the idea was that Narasimha Dev destroyed, so to say, the material arrangements that make the household life possible. So, very intense form. Fortunately though, since Ukra Narasimha is taking his residence in Srila Mayapur, he adjusted to the mood of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, so he kind of calmed its intensity to some degree, so it's not so fierce as he may have been outside of Srila Mayapur. At the same time, he is protecting the Dhamma. There was a good reason for it, as you know, back in the days, because the devotees were attacked by dacoits, there were weapons and everything. Even there's one devotee who's nowadays also sannyasi, I forgot the name, but Bhakti Raghava, he lost his leg due to some grenade or bomb these people were throwing, because he was running, he wanted to protect the whole temple and the devotees, and course, these people had weapons and everything, so he was very brave. I think it was even he had a sick leg, isn't it? Then he lost this sick leg. As far as I understood, from Jananivas, because later so it was kind of a blessing that he actually had by karma, I think, bad leg, and then he lost it in the service to the Lord. We could see it as karma burning. So it was a quite interesting story. So that's one form of Narasimha Dev. And then there's the form we see also when he has Hiranyakashipu on his lap, when he's slaughtering him, and the intestines come out, and Narasimha Dev is full of blood, and then he slaughters the other soldiers, who are present there. And then he gets more or less intense. Of course, he's very intense then, but compared to the Ukra Narasimha from the pillar, he could release the anger, he could kill the perpetrator, the demon. Of course, still his anger was he was so blazed, as we heard yesterday. The demigods, they were not capable to approach him, talk to him, not even Lakshmi. And then they sent Prahlad to pacify him with his prayers because he was particularly capable. And we hear, like if you go to South India, we see many Narasimha temples. Of course, everywhere in the south, but also more central. Ahobilam is, we can say, the home of Narasimha Dev. It's an area above Tamil Nadu. It's almost central India. It's still south. And they're residing 8 forms of Narasimha Dev. And also one form is Yoga Narasimha. That's Narasimha Dev, and he's peacefully sitting, his eyes closed and sometimes open. And he has no weapon in hands, his arms are down. So this is when he cools down from his anger. And it said so it took him a year. 1 year he was sitting to just cool down from his anger. So that's how we can imagine how intense his anger is. Like our anger might cool down sometimes in a few minutes, maybe it lasts a day, 2. Imagine being a whole day, a whole year fully charged with his anger. But then once he has his eyes open, and I was asking what is the meaning, why sometimes he has his eyes open and closed. And told the story that while he was cooling down, and for 11 months he has his eyes closed, and in 12 months he opens the eyes. Because what happened is that in the meanwhile, while he was cooling down, and also some other demons in the universe, they made trouble, and the demigods felt like we should invoke again Narasimha Dev for that. So, but he wasn't willing. He said, no, I'm cooling down from this anger. But he was approached by Garuda Dev, and then he actually handed his weapons to Garuda Dev so that he takes care of the demon. So he empowered his servant and remained in the Yoga Narasimha position. And then we see other forms like in Samhachalam where he's pacified, and then Prahlad is sitting on his lap and he has his blessing hand out and his weapons down. So very peaceful. And also over Lakshmi Narasimha. And there's also a place for each detail. There's a place in Ahobilam, when you go there and take the route through the canyons. There's one place where he washed his hands. And it's a bit reddish stone. They say there, Lord Narasimha washed his hands after killing Hiranyakashipu from the blood. So we see there each detail. And the Ukra Stamba, the actual place where he came out, is also, you can visit in Ahobilam. So you go up, it's quite a, what do you say, style? I forgot this word. Steep, yes, steep, like out there, and rough. You have the sharp stones everywhere, and you only have a rope. It's not like in Switzerland, you have kind of everything with proper metal securities and everything. No, just a rope, which kind of makes you also swing left and right. And if you have such flip-flops, good, don't do this barefoot. I would not recommend that. So it goes quite up there. And then there's a place where I think they installed, looked like some type of Shida, but some form. And they say this is the place where Ukra and Satyanadev came out of the pillar. And you can circumambulate, and you can, down there, you can also circumambulate, which is a bit dangerous because you have some part of it you can walk, and then there's some part where you have to go through some tunnel, but there's no road, so to say, underneath. You just have one stone here, one stone there, and you have to climb through. And if you would slip, that's it actually.
Oh.
Yeah, if you slip and you're down there, like whatever, 50 meters on the next rock, which probably will smash your body, and there's also nothing. There will be no ambulance in time when you need it, you know. So we just did it, and I was glad it was like a big test, and it could challenge my fears to go. But it was so good to have done it. I don't know if I will do it again, but
3 times you did it.
yeah, 3 times. Yeah. One doesn't count. Yeah. I must count. Yeah. So we went there, and it was a great experience. And actually, in front of these Ugrastamba mountain, there's like a huge canyon. Anyway, there are huge canyons, and one has the shape of like 2 wings and a head. And they say Garuda actually sits quite in front of it and takes darshan of the place where Lord Narasimha came out of the pillar. And this whole area of Ahobilam is very impressive because these canyons, they're extremely high. Even you think sometimes, yes, Switzerland has big mountains, but compared, it's at least equal or something. I felt a bit like it appeared bigger. Because they're also continuous, they're really large and like red stones, like some you find also in the United States, something like that. And they have the shape of, sometimes when you see an Antashesh, the snake, when it, you know, how to say, one layer over the other, you know. So they also say, actually, these canyons represent an Antashesh who's residing there in the down. So we walk through, and for each thing you have meditation, how you connected to the associates of Vishnu, the Lord. And I never climbed so many stairs in my life as in Ahobilam, and we did all these 8 places there, 8 single forms in one day. And it was really a marathon, you know, like you walk a lot and you climb. I mean, it's a good purification, and it's interesting to see all these forms, you know, of the Lord. And so you get the whole story, like what happened, you know, and you can meditate on each station. There's even one Narasimha Dev, I forgot which one, that devotees just mentioned shortly. He is being offered meat. Because they say, well, Narasimha Dev, he also more or less, he was a flesh-eating animal, like, or he ate, apparently he drank the blood of Hiranyakashipu, so they offer. I forgot even what animal, and I don't know, let's know how much authorized it might be or not, but it's happening also. There that they offer Narasimha Dev meat, so of course we don't do. We're not interested in that. So yeah, so he has this particular devotees also. Each form of Krishna has its particular devotees with its particular mood. And yeah, so in the south you find so many places, and usually they're a bit remote at times. And Narasimha Dev is often on hills, you find, you know, because they also say he's a lion, and like in there also the lion's usually a bit more uphill, so the temples you need to go to climb up. Means you have stairs, but you walk quite a bit up to take the darshan. And it's an amazing experience. I can just recommend everyone who's interested to be a bit in a meditation on forms of Narasimha Dev to do so. It's certainly a very valuable experience. And so that's a bit something about these different forms for each stage, so to speak, of the pastime of killing Hiranyakashipu, cooling down, being with these devotees. There are forms of different temples that dedicate the temple to a particular aspect of the lila. You might find a temple, like a place where he came off the pillar, a place where it's celebrated how he kills Hiranyakashipu, a place where he's cooling down, a place where he's washing his hands, and so on, a place where he resides with Lakshmi, Prahlad. So systematically you can go everywhere, and then remember the pastimes. That's what temples are meant for, to help us remember and meditate on the pastimes of the Lord, so that we can be absorbed. And my topic was today, or is, the particular prayers and how different personalities relate to Lord Narasimha Dev. And yesterday one was already mentioned. I'll also get back to this one. And of course, one personality that's very important for us nowadays is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He was also mentioned briefly yesterday, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And I would like to pick up on that. We see that Mahaprabhu, of course, in his own presence on this planet, he manifested, of course, different stages, also of his own spiritual ecstasies, however, manifested. In his first half of his life, he was more a pandit, more in a different mood. And at that time, we find that there is in the Adi Lila description where in Srivas Thakur's house. Srivas Thakur was performing maybe I can read it here. Srivas Pandit was performing the Shraddha ceremony of his father, and as is customary, he was hearing the 1,000 names of Lord Vishnu. That's the Vishnu Sahasranam Stotram. It's a part of the Mahabharata, where actually Bhishma Dev is speaking on the battlefield of Kurukshetra when he's laying with the arrows in his body, and Yudhishthira Maharaj is inquiring from him. And at that time also, one of the topics were the 1,000 names of Lord Vishnu. And it's common, particularly here with the Sri Vaishnavas, also with the other Vaishnavas, that they recite these 1,000 names of Vishnu. At that time, Gaura Hari appeared on the scene, and he also began to hear the 1,000 names of Vishnu with full satisfaction. When he thus heard the holy name of Lord Narasimha, Lord Chaitanya became absorbed in thought, and he became angry like Narasimha Prabhu. In his angry mood, his eyes became red, his hair stood on end, all the parts of his body trembled, and he made a thundering sound. All of a sudden, he took a club, and people became greatly afraid, thinking, "We do not know what kind of offense we have now committed." But then Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu adjusted his thoughts and sat down on the seat. This is one of the early editions of Chaitanya Charitamrita, where Srila Prabhupada is describing it. And we can here remove the verses. It said, in the mood of Lord Narasimha Dev, Lord Chaitanya ran through the city streets, club in hand, ready to kill all the atheists. And he said, Narasimha Avesha Dekimaha Techo. I never get into this. Shlokas. Anyway, the translation is, seeing him appearing very fierce in the ecstasy of Lord Narasimha, people ran from the street and fled here and there, afraid of his anger. Seeing the people so afraid, the Lord came to his external senses and thus returned to the house of Srivas Thakur and threw away the club. The Lord became morose and said to Srivas Thakur, when I adopted the mood of Lord Narasimha Dev, people were greatly afraid. Therefore I stopped, since causing fear among people is an offense. So there you can hear some past there where Mahaprabhu was taking up the mood of Narasimha Dev when he was younger, and later on also he still celebrated Lord Narasimha Dev a lot, and actually the South India tour we did twice is actually following the footsteps of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, because he did this whole South India tour. Also he went to all the temples, he saw different Narasimha temples. And also in Jagannath Puri there is, next to the Gundicha Mandir, there is a temple, particularly the Jayara Narasimha. And he has described that he would take darshan of Narasimha before seeing Lord Jagannath. Also in Matalila, when the Lord South Indian tour is described, is mentioned how upon visiting different temples of Narasimha, such as Jayara Narasimha at Simhachala, Ahobila Narasimha at Lakshinatya, and Panakala Narasimha at Mangalagiri, Sri Gauranga Mahaprabhu would dance and offer prayers in ecstasy. One of these prayers we also sing when we my attitude in singing prayers. Shri Narasimha, Jaya Narasimha, Jaya Jaya Narasimha, Praladesha Jaya Padma, Mukha Padma Bringa. All glories to Narasimha Dev, all glories to Narasimha Dev, who is the Lord of Prahlad Maharaj, and like a honeybee is always engaged in beholding the lotus-like face of the goddess of fortune. So you can see, well, I at least made the connection that at that time Mahaprabhu was more in a different rasa. He was more absorbed in the conjugal mellow and more the pastimes of Radha and Krishna. And here apparently it seems that also here Narasimha is put in a different perspective, not as the angry one, but rather as the original Vishnu, because that is what he is. Keshavatrita Narahari Rupa. Actually, Vishnu assumed the form of Narasimha, so he is Vishnu Tattva. And also Prahlad Maharaj did actually not pray, as sometimes it might appear, to Narasimha to protect him. Actually, he prays to Govinda, he prays to Krishna, and then Krishna chose to adopt this particular form, based also on the blessings Brahma had bestowed upon Hiranyakashipu, so it couldn't be a man, couldn't be an animal, couldn't be a demigod, so he had to find the proper form to adjust his appearance in this way so that all the conditions have been met, and he would kill him like this. No by day, no by night, not on the ground, not on the air. So he put on his lap at the time of dawn it was, I guess. Yes, so this way he fulfilled the conditions. And he had said how he is still enjoying in the first place the association with this inner energy, Lakshmi Devi. Also in South India we find wherever the temples there's Vishnu, there's Shri and Bhu, Lakshmi Devi and Bhu Devi. And then there's, this is the two that accompany all the time. Because it is the nature of Vishnu, so Krishna he always is connected with his inner energy. And as we see with Vishnu is alone, he has the Srivatsa, and also this mark of Lakshmi Devi, where Lakshmi is always present with the Lord. So he's always beholding the lotus-like face of the goddess of fortune. So this is what Vishnu Narasimha is doing. And you see many temples where there's Lakshmi Narasimha. And it's said in the spiritual world, in Vaikuntha, Narasimha doesn't look like Narasimha here, but he's a Vishnu Murti with a particular way of how the items are arranged. So this maybe also an interesting thought. And it's even an interesting detail I want to share. There's a Narasimha Maha Mantra, as we all know. And we know the mantra, maybe not even as Narasimha Maha Mantra, which goes, we might chant Om Ukram Viram Mahavishnum Jvarantam Sarvatomukam Narasimham Bhishanam Bhadram Mrityum Mrityum Namami Aham. Probably tomorrow we will chant that a lot, time of Yakya. And its translation goes, I bow down to Lord Narasimhadev, who is ferocious and heroic like Lord Vishnu. He's burning from every side. He's terrific, auspicious, and the death of death personified. And here the devotees who made the book said that in Jagannath Puri, the Pujaris believe that Lord Jagannath is from the mantra is quoted, or at least referred to in many scriptures. The Narasimha Tapani Upanishad also gives the history of this mantra. In the last creation, the presiding deity was Lord Narasimhadev. And this was the mantra inspiring the entire creation into which Lord Brahma was initiated. And in the present creation, the presiding deity is Sri Krishna, and he initiated Brahma into the Kama Gayatri. So there was an interesting detail how Krishna chooses sometimes. In this creation, he's predominant, and then previous creation, apparently Lord Narasimhadev was predominant, and also his mantra. There are also, of course, Narasimha Gayatri mantras for particular deity. That Purya Pujaris are familiar since they worship also Ukara Narasimha Shiva here in our altar, and each morning he gets painted and taken care of by Vaishnavas and Vaishnavis. And here's also an interesting detail. In Jagannath Puri, the Pujaris believe that Lord Jagannath is from previous creation and was originally worshipped as Lord Narasimhadev. You might think, all these Narasimha Bhaktas, they made that up to put Narasimhadev in the foreground, but that's not, that's the statement of the Pujaris. Jagannath Puri Dham floats on the ocean of devastation and is thus never destroyed. Every 12 or 19 years, the deity forms are changed. The installation yajna for the new deities takes about 2 weeks and is mainly comprised of the Narasimha mantra, which is chanted 20,000 times. And that's the Ukram Viram Mahavishnu mantra. So it's something also for protection. It's good to meditate upon. So these are already 2 mantras. And the Ukram mantra is, of course, more of a praise, like it's a bit more in, it's called awe and reverence, like Krishna is acknowledging his power. And the nature of prayer is in general, of course, a way of relating to the Lord, to connect to the Lord, and the moods can be very different. Like Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is more praising Narasimhadev as the enjoyer of Lakshmi Devi, and is more like more sweet, peaceful mood. Whereas this mantra is celebrating Lord Narasimhadev as the ferocious, heroic Lord who burns from every side, who is terrific and auspicious in the death of death personified, so the protector of those who are in distress. And we find some mantras where there's practically translation, destroy my enemies, kill, and burn, Raksha, Pak. I forgot the name, the terms. So but these are different ways to relate to Narasimhadev, and one is also found in the 5th canto. It's in the prayers of the resident of Jambudvip, where actually Prahlad Maharaj was the personality that particularly I think expressed the mantra. It said, Om Namo Bhagavate Narasimhaya Namaste Chase Avir Avir Bhava Vacharanaka Vachadam Shtra Karmashayam Randhaya Randhaya Dhamugrasa Grasa Om Svaha Abhayam Abhayam Atmani Bhujishta Om Ksham. So here Narasimhadev is referred to as the source of all power. He says, Namaste Tejase Avir Avir Bhava. And we'll just get the translation. Yes, from Bhagavatam, 5th canto, chapter 18, text 8. I offer my respectful obeisance unto Lord Narasimhadev, the source of all power. O my Lord, who possesses nails and teeth just like thunderbolts, kindly banish our demon-like desires for fruitive activity in this material world. Please appear in our hearts and drive away our ignorance, so that by your mercy we may become fearless in the struggle for existence in this material world. So this prayer is more focusing on protection in the sense of the inner enemy. You know, some mantras focus on the protection from external enemies, like natural forces or demons and whatever. So here he's pointing out that the demon-like desires for fruitive activity in this material world, please protect us from that, destroy them. Please appear in our hearts and drive away our ignorance. With the conclusion that by your mercy we may become fearless in the struggle for existence. It's even twice here, Abhayam, Abhayam, Atmani Bhuyishta. So fearlessness, Abhaya is fear and Abhaya is fearless, or fearlessness. This is the intention. Please help us to become fearless, because this is the greatest problem actually in the material world. Lust is there, of course, one, but actually fear is the greatest suffering that comes. And Prabhupada uses that in the purport to the verse where it's described that in the 2nd chapter, where it said that the results of devotional service are never lost. You know, even little endeavor on this path, you know, remains practically forever. Like it can protect one from the greatest fear. And Prabhupada said, what's the greatest fear? To take birth again in a body, be ignorant. So this is like the two things, fear and ignorance. That Krishna is protecting us from that by making us brave, but also by enlightening us about the truth. And that then with courage we go the path of truth. This is actually what we try to do. We want to attain self-realization and connect with the absolute truth, and then we have to make choices each day, and we may face so many challenges where to live the truth might be quite a challenge. You know, for yourself, to be truthful, you know, to be consequent in that what you understand to be right or to be wrong. You know, to not yield to one's own weakness of heart. But then there's also like confronting others, you know, who challenge that. We spoke about governments in the beginning who maybe heavily persecute devotees who say, give up that belief or I kill you. Right? Well, besides other things, like you might be simply discriminated on a lesser threatening level. You know, as you said, in Switzerland or in Europe in general, you have it rather easy as a Hare Krishna. Depends, but rarely what challenges are there. So it's always something where we face with the fear of non-acceptance, being excluded, being discriminated, being looked down upon, being whatever, rejected, or you know. So we see that in some details, you know, even in our daily lives. Do we share openly that we practice this way of life? Do we belong to this to this group, you know, to this movement? Of course, it's not necessarily like, of course, you must distinguish. One is the image of the institution, one is that what is the institution actually presenting as the path of Krishna consciousness. Sometimes we have more of an issue with the first than with the latter. But besides that, even if things go well, it's about the way of life you choose, independent of the institution. Simply that you refrain from things like meat eating, and you have a principle saying, no, I want to avoid that. I believe these animals, they're actually also souls with bodies, and therefore it's ethically wrong to kill them. Or I don't intoxicate myself because I believe it's degrading for human beings, it's not good, it should be even forbidden. Perhaps, I might not say that, but actually that's the idea. Prabhupada gives heavy statements also, even on coffee, in first canto. So stuff like that, where we say we take a stance for a certain way of life, a certain perspective on the world, a certain belief, and we might have to defend it. Or the way we look, for some, even a small thing like a shika might be quite a cause of fear, like, oh, will people accept me, or will they look at me, will they, like that. So Prahlad Maharaj is pointing in particular to the vanish our demon-like desires for fruitive activity. So actually seeing the enemy within oneself, which is our tendency to act against our spiritual self-interest by engrossing and engaging in the material concept of life. So prayer is a beautiful way, like in a really also emotionally strongly felt way, to relate to the Lord and to invoke the blessings and to take shelter. That we say, okay, I feel powerless perhaps, I feel unable, I feel trapped in my own mind. Because we do. Krishna says, Mavaivam so jiva loke jiva bhuta sanatana manastantan indriyani Yes. They said, all of you, all living entities are eternal, fragmental parts and parcels, and everyone struggles very hard with the six senses, which includes the mind. What is this? Yes, because the mind is there where all the conceptions are, the thinking, feeling, and willing. We struggle with it because it is so full of materialistic tendencies and ignorance and urges, and so that's the actual challenge for everyone. There's so many enemies perhaps on the outside, or appear at least to be enemies, but the actual enemies is the not purified mind. So that we can take shelter. Narasimha helps us to conquer that enemy, take shelter at his names and at his pastimes, and like this. So that's something I want to share so far. Are there, from your side, any comments or questions?
I have a small question. I was always wondering, Jaidev, he wrote this song with the Dash, and also we sing in Shima prayers, and we sing Keshava Drita Narahari Rupa, but Nara means basically human, and he's taking the human form. I was wondering why it is in human form. We call him Narasimha, especially he's human, half lion.
Mm-hmm.
Is it because no other word was suitable? Why not?
Narasimha, yeah. I'm not really competent to answer the question based on Sanskrit because I'm not sure to know. Yeah, my understanding is also that Nara is the human and Simha that's half man, half lion form. But then Narahari, Keshavatita Narahari Rupa seems to exclude or not particularly mention the Simha, the lion. So it would be a question I also would have to ask someone.
Another, we know different incarnations, they appear in a regular sequence, like Krishna appears once in Abraham. What about Nishinadev?
Yes, since he's also the Das avatar, regular pure incarnation, he also comes regularly. And interesting detail is that he always does it also still individually, playful. It doesn't come always the same way. like also Varahadev you mentioned, it's described sometimes he comes up from the nostril of Brahma, sometimes he comes out of the earthen shell of the universe. He said Varahadev, for example, is residing there. There might be a source that might also tell us that maybe Narasimhadev is residing in a particular shell of the universe also when he comes out. And sometimes also Varahadev comes straight out of the ocean, of the Gaudataka ocean. So also Narasimhadev appears regularly in slightly altered ways, I would assume, in different shapes, colors.
I was thinking because you mentioned that, and I think of Ahobila,
Mm-hmm.
there is a place where he's supposed to be washing his hands.
Mm-hmm.
And also we know in Nauvoo there is the place where he washed his hands. So I was thinking that it seems contradictory, but sometimes maybe it used to be in a different kalpa.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the thing. So we also asked the Uprastamba, like the pillars there, it was the old palace. You can hardly imagine any palace there, it's just mountains, apparently. So don't be a bit heretic. But yeah, then they say it's different kalpa, this kalpa he appeared there, and another kalpas, the place might differ geographically. Shri Palal Lakshmi Simhadev Bhagavan Ki Jai, Shri Prabhupada Ki Jai,
Keshav Madhura Prabhu Ki Jai.
Jai.